You are watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by me, Scott Weiser. I've worked as either a director or animator on more than 30 short and feature-length projects, including projects for DreamWorks, Fox, and independent studios, and my favorite projects are these books, which I wrote, illustrated, and pitched as a feature film at 7 different studios. Today we have with us Brandon Oldenburg, who is a great guy and a great friend, and hey, Brandon. So everybody who's wondering, why did we start late? It's because we actually thought we had started and we hadn't started. So we actually heard about... It was a good drive. Oh, it was great. And we heard about Brandon's history. He was very influential, more influential than I realized, in the founding of ReelFX, which is an independent studio in Texas that is still going strong. He co-founded Moonbot Studios, where they directed the Oscar-winning Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore. And they also created several other commercials and books, and they're just storytelling however you could tell it. And now he has co-founded Flight School Studio, where they are creating similar content, including virtual reality, which is really exciting. And yeah, Brandon, so our question that we were discussing was the founding of those different studios and how they were similar and different. Now, Brandon just told me about, how they kind of created their own feature film production by doing it in stages with Hasbro, by creating it was like a trailer for the film and then a longer production and then,
Right. When we were first starting ReelFX and we were starting to grow, we were trying to break through the ceiling of just doing commercials. And we helped an ad agency here in town win an account for Hasbro, which became a very long-lasting relationship and hundreds of spots that we did. But some of the first spots we did were for G.I. Joe, which was a toy I loved as a kid. And even like the first home movies I made with Super 8, with a Super 8 camera, were G.I. Joe movies with my buddies in grade school. And I was like third grade. Yeah. And so to think that maybe we could get a little tiny taste of that with production was exciting. And we saw every job that we did is maybe for starting early, like startups for animation studios can think of commercials as a sort of a burden or a thing that you just got to get out of the way so you can focus on your original IP. But it's really important to realize that everything you do is a stepping stone. Yeah. And if it's your creative challenge to find what it is in that opportunity to be the thing that allows the next thing to happen for you, that gets you one step closer to your larger goal. Yeah, I love how you say that. Sorry? I love how you say that, because that's how I have to approach each project I do for freelance clients. I have to approach it as, how am I going to push everything I'm doing to the next level? Yeah, exactly. And this thing can help me achieve a greater wish and desire, which is, for us at the time we were starting to grow the company, was to try to figure out how we could work ourselves towards truly being an animation studio, making and telling stories with CGI animation. Yeah. To kind of give context to the time frame of this was in '95, when Toy Story hadn't come out just yet, but we had heard that there was this thing that this company that had been doing these Listerine ads that we loved was going to do a movie about toys. And so we were we should try to figure out how to do that here in Texas. Yeah. And so a few years later, some Hasbro opportunities presented themselves. One in particular was a G.I. Joe commercial, where instead of doing a commercial for the toys, we did it for the website, which allowed us to go around a loophole in animation in toy commercials, which were, you could only show a few seconds, and then the rest had to be hands holding the toys. Yeah. So it could, which is a crazy restraint. It could be 100% fantasy if we were just getting people to the website. Yeah, just a video for the website, right? This was before the big .com bubble burst, and it was like a GIJoe.com website where you could go and you could check out the new toys and order them. And so we made this spot that looked like an animated feature. And so the way we approached the production on this was that we took all of our favorite clips from action movie trailers and then made a fictitious movie trailer with live action, and then we used that as our storyboard. And then we replaced, Harrison Ford with Duke, and we replaced, whomever bad guy with Destro or Cobra Commander, and it turned into what felt like a legit movie trailer
Yeah.
when we were finished with it. And then when we released this online, people were calling Hasbro left and right. Like, the phone was ringing off the hook the first day because people actually thought there was a CGI G.I. Joe movie. But through all of that interest, it allowed us this opportunity to actually create a direct-to-video, actually 2 direct-to-videos with Hasbro.
Yeah.
Again, each one of these was making the window opening wider.
Just a little bit bigger, yeah. Yeah. Another thing about your story that I don't want to lose that you told earlier is that it's a really cool parallel I found where you had this idea of, I want to do music videos, illustrated music videos. And then when you found out about the company ReelFX and what your friends were doing there, you thought, well, we should be doing things like that bouncing lamp on PBS. I thought that was really cool. My journey is actually pretty similar.
That was my knowledge of CGI, right? Was the bouncing lamp and Tron, and that was very appealing, but it was also, it wasn't approachable. I didn't major in CGI animation, but it nonetheless, it's like, I love I like building teams. I liked the TV show as a kid called A-Team. And I like having this sort of heist mentality that you have a specialty and you have a specialty and you do too. And together we're gonna like rob a bank. Yeah. And so that sort of approach, that sort of maverick approach, is an adrenaline rush. And that's what's been exciting about starting all these different studios, was like having a very clear objective, that giant jewel that's protected by lasers, which was the animated feature. Right. And
same here.
The animated feature for ReelFX for all those years was that jewel protected by the lasers. Right. And we figured out our way to, with this rogue team that slowly grew and grew, to get to that goal. And it was super rewarding to know that we were going to achieve that goal, and had achieved that goal many years later. Around 2004.
With Book of Life, right?
Well, Book of Life was the big breakthrough, right? For ReelFX. I was still at ReelFX and was contemplating a transition when we brought Jorge in to pitch Book of Life. Right. And that seemed like a really great thing for the company to do. But there was already a separate film that was in the production pipeline, or moving into the production pipeline. At the time was called Time Turkeys, which became Freebirds. Yeah, Freebirds. Yeah, so that came before it. And there was other animated content that came before that. There was a direct-to-video that we had done, several actually, that had been done for other people. We had built a pipeline that was really good at telling other people's stories. But the biggest challenge was telling our own. Right. And garnering the confidence in studios to trust us to tell our own story. And so that became a thing where I felt like, okay, we are finally achieving our goals. Mm-hmm. However, I did not see myself in the role of directing. The problem that I personally was running into was having a studio having confidence in me to direct. Right. You could bring somebody from the outside who had done something that had clout. And that was what ReelFX was needing at that time. And unfortunately, there wasn't enough confidence on the studio side for me to direct. So I had to prove myself. I kind of had to leave the nest for a while, if you will. Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And there was a film we were developing internally at ReelFX for many years. Like, even in the early infant stages of the company, we had done this little short that had never been released in festivals called The Man in the Moon. Oh, with Bill Joyce. Yeah, and this Man in the Moon short was starting to kind of fall into certain people's hands, and they were really thinking, oh, this is really cool. There's something here. And eventually we got to the point where we flew in Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Katzenberg and Walden Media. And then for a moment there, all three of those companies were vouching for having some ownership in that IP, which eventually was sold to DreamWorks. And became Rise of the Guardians, right? Rise of the Guardians, exactly. Okay. And that was really good for the company financially, but for me personally, it was heartbreaking. Like, I was crying. Like, wow. That was going to be our Toy Story. That was going to be ReelFX's Toy Story. Right, yeah. And that was going to be our first original film that we were going to release. And and it was like, here's another example. It was like being a pregnant teenager and then being told, you are not mature enough to raise that child. We'll take it from here. And so it's kind of how for me it felt. I had a postpartum depression on that handoff. Yeah. But there was this other opportunity that presented itself in Louisiana. And originally I brought some of my ReelFX buddies over to Shreveport to consider it a satellite studio. It just wasn't financially the right step at the time. So after 15 or so years at ReelFX, I was like, okay, I kind of need to leave the nest and fly and get out of the shadow of the company for a bit and see if I can prove myself as just straight up original storyteller. Yeah. And so that was something we did. So,
and you did it.
Yeah. And what's crazy.
Many times over.
So insane was the first thing right out of the gate, right?
Right.
To do, which was a very clear vision of when we were just 4 employees at Moonbot, it was a very clear vision of what we wanted to do. We were like, look at that wall over there. Let's imagine a shelf and let's imagine an Academy Award on it. Let's visualize that and say that's the goal right now. That's what we want to achieve. And we're going to make a short film. It's going to become a calling card for the company. And as we make this short film, we are building our A team. We are building the studio that's going to then go on to make other things. Yeah, that was the crazy vision, and it worked for a while. And it for 9 years, we opened this door of opportunity right out of the gate with the Academy Award. And then we had a string of amazing things happen after that. Yeah. We had an app Hall of Fame app with the More Less More app, and then New York Times selling book, and then the whole time, like literally, when walking off that stage at the Academy Awards, I was just freaked out. I was actually kind of terrified because it was sort of like, we're gonna have a sophomore slump now.
Exactly.
And is it all downhill from here now? Like, what do we do? But the goal was, even at Moonbot, was to make an animated feature and to achieve that goal.
And I could tell that from the outside.
Yeah, that was the wish. We were going to build towards that goal. Yeah. And we had the thing is that happens when you get all this recognition with in a short flying books, is that the phone rings off the hook, and people are throwing opportunity at you left and right. Right. And if you aren't sharp enough to realize it, time flies by, and it can be a year later and you still haven't chosen your path. And for us, a lot of time flew by. And my advice is, when you get a little bit of viral buzz of any kind, it's very important to make a decision quickly on what you do next and to announce that and talk about that. Yeah. Build off of that momentum. Because if you wait a year, you lose momentum. And if you wait over 18 months, then you've become history, and people have forgotten, especially for a small little group of people that are in a very small town off the grid, off of the Hollywood grid.
Boy, but I didn't forget you. So I love. So
sorry, I talked a lot there.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. My dream was to go to Pixar or Disney, and then I was going to become a director in 10 years. That was my dream. It was a very ignorant dream, right? But you got to have a dream. It's what drove me to break into the industry.
Ignorant.
Yeah. So I break into the industry. I'm working at Rhythm and Hughes on Alvin and the Chipmunks 3, and Fantastic Flying Books. Just the trailer came out. I remember seeing that trailer, and I thought, I know that I was thinking Pixar, but that's where I want to work. So I don't know if you remember, but I had this
I do
campaign to work at Moonbot.
I remember.
And actually, I took a job up in Vancouver, and I knew that when I got up there, I would get the Moonbot offer, and I did. So I ended up sending Dave Wilson, who I'm sure you're well acquainted with.
The timing is always rough, right?
Yeah. But the thing was that I think that was good about that Moonbot thing is it started me. I was working at this university where it was like the student job that I took because I had been unemployed for a while, and the industry was really struggling. And they allowed me to create all these little short films and just kind of do what I wanted, as long as it benefited the store in some way. And so I would always say I was creating my own Moonbot, you know.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you were.
Yeah, and it was a wonderful inspiration.
Great example to the point where Moonbot shuttered 9 years in on it. So then you don't want to use that as an example.
I know.
And the thing that we learned at ReelFX that has proven to be the testament is you can never diminish the value of work for hire.
No.
Work for hire keeps doors open. Work for hire puts fuel in the tank. And it was something Disney did and never stopped doing. And it was really important to keep fuel in the tank. Walt said, I make movies so I can fund the next movie. He doesn't make movies to make money.
Yeah.
And so when you're doing projects and you're working towards a goal, you can never forget who got you there and how it got you there. And for a while with the growth of ReelFX, we thought, oh, we'll do VFX, we'll do visual effects for movies, which we quickly learned is not a viable business.
Right.
For example, Rhythm and Hughes is one I'll use. Is they, of all the companies
who went bankrupt
and all of that, still couldn't keep it together.
Yeah.
Because it's such an abusive business, as we saw with Life of Pi.
And they actually kept it together for several years, so it looked like it was possible. And when I got a job there, it was like, oh, I'm going to stay on here and I'm going to work on all these little things. And I was one of the first rounds of layoffs that started till about a year later after our layoff is when they went bankrupt and won the Oscar for Life of Pi. So it was like, wait, there's something going on here that's wrong. It's not working.
Something's not right. And I certainly don't have the answer for it. But all I can say though is it has a lot to do with remembering where you come from and remembering what fuels the tank. Yeah. And there's art and commerce to everything. You have to respect both sides. Right. And we have these weekly meetings at Flight School where we call Recon, and we go over everything that's on the docket for what's in production, what potential job opportunities, what state they're in, what we're doing for original content. But original content, for some reason, was at the very bottom of the list on this living document. Yeah. And recently we put it up because it is the priority of the studio to tell original stories, because that is what hopefully one day one of those original stories will become that Winnie the Pooh, which becomes an evergreen property that lives on in the universe and it keeps going and going and going. And hopefully eventually it fuels the dreams of what we have within the studio to continue to tell stories.
Well, this sounds so familiar too, because I'm only balancing freelance of one person, right? But it's interesting to see how even on the inside of me, I feel like I have to finish all this client work and I have to make all this money, but I know that I need to be creating that original content. And sometimes it's like pulling teeth to get me to force myself to do that stuff.
But, it really is discipline, and it is very difficult and can sometimes seem completely impossible. But the shoemaker has no shoes is a thing we can all fall into very easily, and you've got to somehow cobble another shoe together each day if you can. You continue to find time each week to think about the original content that you're developing. Move it forward, even if it's an incremental tiny little inch. You've got to keep moving it forward.
Yeah, and that incremental tiny inch is really, I think, the key to it, because at some point a project will gain momentum and then it'll start to snowball, and it's like, I've got to finish this thing, and I will lay aside the time for it.
Where you didn't think through enough and you didn't plan enough, because you never know when that window will present itself, and then you better have had your ducks in a row or you're going to some time.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome. Well, great point. So you did mention before we went live that ReelFX, you're still connected to them, actually. They're your sister company. And
they never left, or I never, in some weird way, we're bound together.
Sorry, you broke up
in a very
there.
spirit. It's like, I don't think I'll ever not be. I'm just saying, I don't think we'll ever not be connected. And so ReelFX grew and has continued to grow and evolve and change and shift shapes a bit. And one thing that we discovered and we realized when we started Flight School a few years ago was that it wasn't just flight school, but it was the company as a whole was in this identity crisis, in the sense that ReelFX does a lot. And
Yeah, you do.
when you take a step back and you look at it from the outside, you're kind of like Walmart. You do everything, and it's all okay, and that's bad.
Yeah, yeah.
We realized that we actually did everything really good, but people are seeing it in this diluted form, so we need to self-split. So ReelFX is really 4 companies.
Huh.
There's one, what we call ReelFX, is the animation for feature and series. That's ReelFX.
Okay.
Now, when it comes to commercials, which we all cut our teeth on, and what the company's founded on doing, is now called a tech plan.
Okay.
And a tech plan is strictly doing the work for hire commercial work,
Yeah.
but they're doing it with a heavy design sensibility, and it's important to compete in that space that you have people with a vision and voice and direction, and also a high end on design sensibility.
Yeah.
And so that's going on at a tech plan.
Okay.
And so that's its own little group, and they're focused and they're making amazing content just for that. And there isn't a conflict of interest. And what happened early on when we were doing Hasbro spots as a whole on ReelFX company was that our clients started to go, you guys really just want to do animated features. We're just an annoyance. And you used us to get to that. And it's like, well, no, we never want you to feel that way. I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah.
It was a lot of it was how we were being perceived, just because we were just wearing our vision and dreams on our sleeves. And so it was really important to kind of create this separate division. So Attack Plan was born just recently, a few years ago, when we were starting Flight School, which Flight School really is a merger of sorts between the creative leadership of Moonbot and what was the beginning of a VR division that had been growing strong for a few years at ReelFX, which was called ReelFX VR.
Okay.
The combination of all the really talented developers and crew that were a part of ReelFX VR and the creative leadership of Moonbot came together, Voltroned into what's Flight School. And Voltron is an example we're now using for the whole company. We are stronger together. We use the greater than symbol internally now for branding. We're better together.
Yeah.
Greater together. And so each one of the components of the company are a different arm or a leg of the Voltron. And there's a 4th company I failed to mention, which is called Lodge 26, handles branding. And so Lodge 26 is, you could say, the smallest of all the companies, but it's definitely what they do has a really big impact. Lodge 26 has done some amazing work in the retail space and branding space and vision for companies and their look and vibe and their tone. They helped us with our branding at Flight School. They've helped Attack Plan.
Which is really nice.
Yeah, it is really great to have that
great
skill set in-house.
Yeah.
And they've helped brands and even invented brands, one of which is called Shinola, which is a Detroit-based brand that makes leather goods, even like unique bespoke items like really awesome headphones, cool turntables. Watches is the big component of Shinola.
Yeah.
And so that's a really cool brand that was invented by them. So that's just an example of, it's great to have a skill set like that under the umbrella as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. Wow.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, so you have also remote work in a way, because you have another studio up in Montreal, right?
Well, there's 3 offices. There's the Hollywood office, which houses roughly about, when it needs to, up to like 25 people.
Yeah.
It depends on when things are in production. I
have been to that one, actually.
No, you have. Great.
Yes.
So we recently moved from the Santa Monica office to the Hollywood location, which is literally across the street from what we call the Commissary Cube building, which is where all the animation's going on for Netflix.
Okay.
So it's really conveniently located for the future work we're going to do.
Yeah.
But in Montreal, which has grown just over the last 2 years of, over the growth of Flight School, we've watched the whole Montreal office grow. And that's been in a crazy speed of growth for a small group contingency up in the Montreal office. That's remote. But for the most part, it's majority ReelFX and the production that's going on for feature.
Okay.
Now, Dallas is still the hub. And so the core leadership that what became of ReelFX animation is still in Dallas. And like we were talking earlier, video conferencing is just as important as a pencil now in the office.
It's vital, yeah. Makes sense.
It's happening in every room right now, almost because of the importance of communication between the two offices and the tools they have in production.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So here we are.
Here you are. Yeah, you broke up there, and I think we picked up nearly everything. I think the last
I'm sorry.
thing.
Something?
Yeah, but I think we caught it. I was listening very closely to make sure we caught everything there.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. That happens when there's lots of video conference going on in every room. So.
Yeah, that's probably the problem here is that there's so many. But yeah, there's two movies in production at ReelFX right now. One is the Scooby movie, and the other is called Rumble now. It was once called Monster on the Hill, which is based on a book by Rob Harrell that was optioned by ReelFX as an original story that was developed here before the Paramount partnership happened.
Great.
And so, yeah, it's real important to know that the next full-on original, baked out of the studio feature after Book of Life is Rumble.
Okay.
However, there's been a lot of movies that have come through the pipe since that we've helped. ReelFX has helped over the years.
Wow, crazy. So let's talk a bit about the future of the industry. What do you think we can do to improve the future of the animation industry? Because it's now branched into several branches. You have virtual reality, you have games, you have feature films, you have episodic content, you have all kinds of content out there. What can we do as directors and animators and whoever else is watching this program to improve the industry for all of us?
Well, it's certainly one thing that we're witnessing and we've gone through now is we just moved out of our Deep Ellum office, which is just a mile. I'm looking directly over at it from this building. It's a mile over from where we are now. And that was a really big building. It was like a campus.
Right.
And even though in its modesty and its scale compared to bigger studios like Disney or Pixar or DreamWorks, we didn't have fountains, we didn't have our own cafeteria and chefs and free ice cream. But we did have a pretty bougie space that accommodated a lot of people. But what we all have to do now is realize we don't need all of that. We don't need all of that. But we do need to take care of our people, and we do need to be able to create an atmosphere of creativity and encourage that amongst all of our people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we don't need to be that big.
No.
And it's certainly, I look at some of my favorite studios out there right now, like Cuckoo and Tonka House, they're proving it. They're showing that you can have handcrafted storytelling and have it happen in a very modest environment that doesn't feel like you're just in a hole in the wall in a strip shopping center.
Yeah.
They're caring a great deal about culture, and they're caring a great deal about the livelihood of their people.
Right.
But at the same time, they're not having to accommodate them with this sort of DreamWorks bougie atmosphere.
Which it is fun when you visit. But
awesome. Yeah,
it also drives the cost through the roof. And
that's exactly
big
it.
Layoffs,
That's why
you have animators really struggling to find work, and
Right. We're turning around movies over here for half of what they charge, or even less.
Yeah.
And when you go visit, you go, oh, that explains it. That's why that movie cost $190 million to produce.
Right.
I understand, because you had to, feed the fish, the koi fish,
have the
and
yoga
you had
class
to, you had to keep all the fountains pumping. I understand now.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, and Tonko House, that's cool that you bring them up. They're in a couple interviews, so it'll be exciting to talk to them about that. And it's very inspirational to me about how I went to their presentation at CTNX, and they talked about how they actually started doing a bunch of commercial work, and they actually decided, no, we've got to shift back to original work. And so they not only did one original piece, they started cranking out three original pieces, and I'll be fascinated to talk about that and figure out how they did that.
Yeah, it requires a great deal of risk,
Right.
and if there's any proof in that, there was a great deal of risk when we were starting Moonbot. If you bet on yourself, which my friend David Needham, who was one of the main founders of ReelFX originally, and was the one who was handling the money all the time, and the one who was like the one stressing over like keeping the doors open and the lights on in the early days of ReelFX. He gave me some advice when I was considering starting Moonbot, which was, do what you feel in your heart is best, obviously, but betting on yourself is the best bet you can make.
Yeah.
And if you feel inclined to do something, always bet on yourself in that endeavor.
Betting on yourself is the best bet to make. I like that a lot.
Yeah. It really is. So when we're all presented with these choices in life that are really going to be life altering, go with the one that has risk, that feels right. Because it can always be worse. Things can always get much worse.
Yeah.
And
well, and they are worse in different parts of the world. So it's like, I think we should just take advantage of all that we have here. We have so much that we can leverage.
There's some animators right now that we're working with on a VR for Good project.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say they're based in the Philippines. And it's just a couple of guys, and the quality of what they're turning out is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I could imagine for them that their cost to keep the lights on is much lower than ours.
Yeah.
And it's a great opportunity for that studio. And I think also my brother, who works in animation, has a group of animators he's trying to help in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm. And it's happening all over. There's going to be, I think, my prediction is, you're going to start to see if there's talented people all over this planet in all these small little towns everywhere that just don't have the notoriety. You see this like with singing contest shows, right? Like these singing contest shows find people in all these little small towns, and they're incredible.
Yeah.
That's to be said for animation as well.
Oh, yeah.
And early on when we were starting the ReelFX, there was and one of our first best animators we ever hired was a guy who was doing embroidery in East Texas. And he had accessed the software we were using at the time called Animation Master, and had done some really cool stuff with it, all on his own accord, all with his own, energy off the clock from his day job. And he is now living on the West Coast. He worked on several Star Wars movies. He now does pre-visualization for a lot of, blockbuster features. But for a while, we were able to have him on the team here, which was his window of opportunity to his greater goals. Yeah. And that's just a testament. John Griffith is his name, and that's just an example of, there's talent everywhere, even outside of North America, that is going to create the greatest next little animation studio.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's why I've been so excited about the idea of remote and virtual studios.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been working on as my passion project. So we'll see how that comes. But I have thought about that.
You've done that successfully, right? I mean, you've been able to lean in on talent when you need it.
I have here and there, but I obviously want to do it on a bigger scale where it's like I can have somebody in Puerto Rico work on my film, and Zimbabwe work on my film, and that sort of thing. And
yes,
it'd be amazing. So I love how you talk about that and how you're so open to that. It seems like a lot of people in the industry, especially when you've worked so hard to build a studio, right?
Yes.
That you would maybe feel threatened a little bit by all the talent out there.
Right.
They could do it cheaper and faster.
There's one guy I want to plug who's really talented. His name's Fernando PQ. Okay. And we really wanted to bring him on board up here in America, but it's expensive to hire people from outside of another country.
Yeah.
And it's a risk to spend all the money to try to get them the green card, H-1 visas and all of that. It's a risk, and it's an investment. But by working virtually with people and allowing them to be wherever they are to help your team, it's great, but it's never as great as having them in the same room. But
No,
he's
yeah.
gone on to do great things. He just released a music video short film that's incredible. I don't know the name of it offhand, but Fernando PQ is his name, and
it's P, the letter P and the letter Q.
Yeah, P E Q U E.
P-E-Q-U-E. Okay, awesome.
I think that's like.
Awesome. We'll look him up.
Yeah, please do.
That's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, okay, we are nearing the end of the program, so we're going to have the Get Wiser moment that someday I'll probably have a little jingle for. For now, it's just us.
Cue jingle. Okay.
Cue the jingle. Da 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 da. Yeah. So, the
You're
Get Wiser.
a singer. You could do it a cappella right now.
But I didn't practice. It's funny because people are like, "You're so good at singing. Why don't you just bust something out?" And it's like, "But I'm nervous. I didn't practice."
All right. Next time.
But next time we'll have a jingle. So, yeah. So, what moral obligation do you think, as a filmmaker and storyteller, do we have to the world culture, if any? We don't have to have one. You could that could be your answer as well, but.
Well, I think as storytellers, and the one thing that I've learned a lot is that, for example, science fiction, the best science fiction is the one that shows us the world that we could be living in, good or bad.
Right, yeah.
And as storytellers on any story that's told, I think it's important that you think about what it is you're truly saying, and more importantly, what it is you're asking of your audience to do. Because sometimes filmmakers are just making a story and telling it to themselves, and there may be a place for that, but I'm not interested in that.
Yeah, me either.
I'm not telling a story for myself. I think we all need to have a voice and share our perspective. And whether it's a good story, a bad story, it's our perspective, and it should be truthful to us, and it should also hopefully have a call to action, in my opinion. I want people to leave their seats after experiencing the story in whatever medium and feel like there's something they should do or talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, one of the best films I've ever seen is Sunset Boulevard. And I remember seeing that for the first time and sitting down with my wife after and saying, I need to change my life here. And it was funny because I've studied theme and studied story structure and stuff, and it took me a while to break down that story structure and really understand it. But I still got it on a gut level. I knew that I had to change.
So what? Change your life in what way? Did you feel inclined to become a butler that took care of chimpanzees and an old lady silent movie star, or did it make you want to write screenplays? And what was your call to action after that?
If I were to phrase the theme, the core of that story, it is any obsession. If you let it become too much of an obsession, or any preoccupation, if you let it become an obsession, it can destroy you. So the main character, he begins the story, face down in a pool, and you know that he's, sorry to spoil this for you. That's how it begins. But by the end, you understand why. Why did he end up in that pool? And every character in that story actually inhibits that theme in some way. It's a powerful theme.
It is.
But for me, it was like, I kind of prioritized my career too much in a way, to a point that I think it was becoming unhealthy.
It's an important lesson.
And that's where I changed.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson.
Yeah. And I loved how you said, always be truthful, because a lot of films, when I start to break them down, I start to see where there's not truth.
Yeah.
There's a lot of little lies being told, even though most people aren't going to look at that and say that's a blatant lie. But if you're going to establish a theme, you need to be discovering the truth and not just presenting, I think, your ideology or your politics or your whatever. For me, when I'm writing a story, it's about discovering the truth through the process of writing.
Right.
Rather than trying to force my own current ideas on somebody. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And to add to that, it's like I can't help but think about the last movie I saw which was Ad Astra, and I walked out of it disappointed because I didn't care about the characters, and I felt like sometimes where the truth lies in that one is maybe the filmmaker who was telling the story maybe had some issues he or she was working through related to personal relationships, because it was void of that. And maybe there's a point to that and I'm missing it, but I didn't care about the characters because I didn't get a sense of the relationship with the father the main character had. I didn't get a sense of what he was leaving behind on the planet Earth and his care for his family.
Yeah.
So, and it seemed like the story was all about family, but it wasn't. It lacked the core key element of substance and family. And so therefore, back to the storyteller, I wonder if that storyteller was struggling with the truth of that. And,
that is an interesting.
That it wasn't truthful to them because maybe they didn't have family, or they didn't.
Wow.
They lacked the true emotional experience that's required to tell that story.
Yeah, that is a very interesting hypothesis. I really like it, actually. One of the I don't know if I'll plug the book, but there is a screenwriting book out there that I don't know if I'll recommend it just because it became too convoluted for me, but I liked at the end how he talked about how when you're writing a story, you need to become a better person for writing the story. Like, you're on your own hero's journey with every story you write.
I like that.
And if you discover, along with that character, and really discover the full truth of whatever your topic is, then you'll have a stronger story and hopefully a better life. And
we have a writer friend, artist, talented storyteller that we work with often. His name's Jake Wyatt, and I love what he said a few years ago, when we're coming up with ideas for stories, we shouldn't call them even ideas just yet. He says, call them just notions. You want to follow your notion, and I feel like when you're writing a story, you shouldn't call it a story just yet. It's not a story just yet. You're figuring it out. It's just a notion, and you're following it.
Yeah. You're
following that notion, and like you're saying, is you're hopefully finding the truth and gaining some sort of reward for having gone on that journey, some sort of enlightenment to why you told it, why you felt inclined, or you felt like you had that notion to go down that path to tell that story.
Well, and I wonder if you know your... Well, sorry, what?
I was just saying, as a storyteller, I think we all can have these notions. Like, I'm just feeling inclined to just sort of tell a story about this or that or this. And there's a comedian I like, Dimitri Martin, and he talks about his process. And it's like, for him, it's like he may see something that isn't funny to him, but it's something about it is compelling. And maybe there is a joke in that. And he'll put it in a drawer or write it down or draw a picture of it and hold on to it. And it won't come to him for another decade, but it will come to him. And I think we're all gathering ingredients for storytelling every day.
Yeah, I think so. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think your notion is a good notion. This is a theory of mine. Well, you can rebuttal it if you want to, but you're onto a good notion when it starts to get scary. Because this current project I'm working on, I thought, would anybody ever publish this thing at one point? Because I was like, this is getting in dicey territory here. And luckily it's not. It gets scary. Yeah. So you agree with that?
Absolutely. I'm terrified right now.
Good. I can see you shaking.
We have a few things we're cooking right now, and I'm terrified.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's wonderful. It's a good thing, and it's like a roller coaster. You just need to embrace it and just put your hands up and go over the edge.
Yeah. That's great. Well, I think that's the future of filmmaking. Is filmmakers who are willing to do that. So I think that's a great note to end on. And where would you like people to find you?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter, BrandonBot, or on Instagram, Flight School Brandon, or of course go to like us on Facebook, Flight School Studios, and keep track of Flight School on all those social media channels like Instagram and Twitter. Okay. The latest thing that we just completed, which I'm super proud of Adam and Bo for their vision on this game that we've released that's on Xbox and Twitch and Steam, which is called Creature in the Well. An amazing game that continues to get lots of great press. So we're very proud of that. And it's a beautiful and fun game. And we're going to continue to make more. So we recently made a partnership with Madison Wells Media. And we've got 2 games that we're conceptualizing right now. And we're going to move into the production pipeline soon. And outside of games, of course, we, like you were mentioning earlier, VR is one of the mediums we work in, and there's a VR experience that's still ongoing that you can do if you're in Austin called War Remains that we made in partnership with specifically Madison Wells Media. So please check out warremains.com so you learn more about that project. It's an experiential memory, and you walk in the footsteps of a soldier during World War I, and it's very haptic. Skywalker Sound did all the sound design for it. It's really cool, but it's also so frustrating because it's such a site-specific thing, and very few people can get to do it right now.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I at some point in the future, we're going to make a port for home, which certainly won't have all of the stuff you can touch, but it's still nonetheless going to be a compelling thing for people to do. So those are my plugs right now.
Great. Awesome. Well, and you can find me at scottweiser.com/follow and on Instagram, and I'll put all the links that Brandon's talking about into the show notes. So you will be able to find them very easily. You don't have to remember them. Just go down into the show notes. There they are. So we'll close now, and thank you so much, Brandon, for joining us. And until next time. You have been watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser and produced by Lauren Shakin. Copyright Scott Weiser, LLC, 2019.